Okay, fine.
Hello again. You didn't think I'd be back. I didn't think I'd be back. Yet, here we are. So, let's begin. Firstly, this video isn't a continuation of or response to the previous one. Indeed, it isn't remotely related. In this video, instead of analysing existing components of SCP-SL, I'm going to present a few whimsical potential additions. In no world should these be taken entirely seriously. Though I think they all have merit and have, to the best of my ability, thought their consequences through, I have no remote idea of their feasibility, nor potential popularity. As such, consider all notions as fun hypotheticals. Regardless, I would like to present these separate ideas under the broad theme of systems, conceived with the general goal of adding interactivity to existing game components. So, let us begin. How about a Tesla Gate control booth? Picture it, imagine it. You, a lowly D-boy, in control of a Tesla Gate. Can you feel the power, the electrifying thrill of it? Well, hopefully not, but nonetheless, would it not be cool to occasionally harness this element of the facility for your own means? Here is my proposal. An auxiliary chamber just wider than the single door that leads into it from either one side of the Tesla, and about 2/3 the length of the Tesla corridor, centered perpendicular to the Tesla itself. A short bulletproof glass panel would run about 2/3 the length of the chamber, centered, allowing the operator to observe the entrances and the Tesla. Exactly in line with the Tesla, a button set into the console. Press it, zoop. Press it too many times in sequence, however, and boom, the console would explode, killing any chamber occupants, that's you, blowing off the chamber door, and shorting the Tesla permanently. Not even PC can operate it now. I suggest this room would possess a generation rate that would place it on roughly every map in 3. So, what would this room provide us in terms of gameplay? Numerous things. Predominantly, it's just cool, fun to use, etc. Being able to harness an element of the map, one that has been perhaps used against you in the past, is, I propose, very satisfying. In order to preserve this coolness, and fit with general keycard themes, I suggest the chamber would require Containment Access Tier 3 and/or Armory Access Tier 3 to open. This would allow Containment Engineer, Facility Manager, Captain, Chaos Insurgent, and of course O5 cardholders to access the Tesla control room. If the and/or clause is unfavored, because, it's not used anywhere else in the game, and it's relatively complex, the room could be limited to Containment Level 3 access only. No entry to Armory holders. Though it would seem weird to put access to the Tesla on a par with the Warhead, only Containment Engineer, Facility Manager, and O5. Alternatively, it would seem equally weird for a Containment Engineer or Facility Manager to be unable to access the room if we limited it to only Level 3 Armory access. Regardless, besides the satisfaction players could obtain from using it, we also stand to benefit from the strategic depth it could provide. With the sad removal of Larry's femur breaker, we are left bereft of any specific map element that encourages player sacrifice, except, theoretically, Warhead Silo. The ability to overload the Tesla, killing yourself and shorting it for the remainder of the round, would provide that opportunity. Say the Tesla is positioned in a high-traffic area, or bottlenecks the entrance to Heavy or another important location, and PC has perhaps been spamming it. A particularly valiant captain scientist, or perhaps D-boy under duress, could eliminate that threat permanently. This sort of play has always appealed to me personally as a way to have a definitive and lasting impact on a round, and even to those less concerned with round outcomes can provide a great setup for compelling roleplay. Think back to all those arguments regarding who should be the one to sacrifice to Larry, or those times you have escorted or been escorted as a D-boy to the femur breaker. This would provide a similar experience in the absence of that grisly machine. Additionally, beyond sacrificing oneself to disable Tesla, you could actually use it to hold a choke point yourself. A couple of NTF holed up in Heavy could be seriously aided by an ally in a forward Tesla room, prohibiting the Chaos charging the MTF while they were reloading, for example. This could create interesting emergent scenarios where the Chaos determined that instead of directly pushing the NTF, they should move around the Tesla, avoiding it entirely. As a final touch, I would recommend adding a defibrillator cosmetic on the back wall of the new chamber, perhaps next to a medkit box, as a little joke to the sheer deadliness of the gate. No, temporarily imaginary character Jeff. No amount of defibrillating will bring that toasty D-boy back. Proposal 2 is a little more mundane. Merely, I suggest a direct comm link between Nuke Silo and Nuke Control. By this I mean a two-way device set into each console that would allow constant communication between anyone standing by the console and holding the activation key. I further suggest that, while a player in, say, Nuke Control has the comm device activated, he should be able to hear Nuke Silo as if he was in the location of the device down there, and vice versa. This, I think, would further add to the potential drama created by unforeseen events transpiring while on call. Imagine you are in Nuke Silo, set to guard it against the SCPs, and chatting with the NTF in Nuke Control, when suddenly you hear gunfire, followed by Chaos footsteps. Fuck. Or perhaps you are a facility guard in Nuke Control after a successful early game, and are coordinating with a fellow guard in Silo when you hear him mention the elevator, tell you to wait, and then hear sounds suspiciously alike to the rending of flesh. Perhaps the dog might even fool you momentarily by repeating wait a few times into the mic. I suggest you can see the potential for drama this connection would create. Additionally to the roleplay and fun, this feature would also allow a little bit of strategy and coordination regarding nuking the facility, something which is usually sorely lacking. The final, and by far most complex to explain suggestion is introduced as follows. Vision, knowledge, accurate and current information. All crucially important aspects involved in operating a profitable marketing firm in the Swiss canton of Schaffhausen. Equally, they're also all very important for survival and success in the bowels of Site-02. Hence, I unveil the security offices. There's two of them. We've got cameras all over the facility, yet we don't seem to have a room from which to access them. In hindsight, this seems like a slight oversight. As such, my proposal. Line a wall with monitors, chuck some labels underneath them, and allow he who might access that room to gather a little information about his environment. Specifically, I suggest two separate rooms fulfilling the same purpose for different areas, one in entrance and one in heavy containment. So, where should we put these rooms? For the entrance zone instance, I propose inserting it onto a wall in the intercom room, given its current mild uselessness and open space. For the heavy containment equivalent, I suggest placing the monitor array in the PC room antechamber, because it is the only room I can think of that isn't currently used or must maintain its present level of access. Speaking of access, I additionally suggest that a simple update to the intercom element of access cards to read intercom and camera, or systems or something, would seamlessly integrate the new rooms, allowing access with O5, Facility Manager, Captain, Chaos Insurgency, and Containment Engineer cards. Alternatively, access to the camera rooms could fall under containment levels, sitting then I suggest at level 3. If so, it would be necessary to place this camera room elsewhere from intercom, unless you want intercom to not be accessed by the intercom access level. In which case, I propose either converting one of the classic entrance dead ends, or opening up the office room that generates next to the checkpoint. The benefit of intercom, however, is that it takes a while to get downstairs, that's risk-reward, and leaves ample room for players to experience one of the intended dramatic consequences of the camera rooms. Specifically, I suggest one of the camera feeds displayed should be that one directly outside the chamber. As such, a couple NTF might be watching the feeds, planning their next moves, when suddenly they notice Plague Doctor waltz into the corridor above them and turn to walk down the intercom stairs. Uh-oh. In addition to the feed displaying the direct exterior of whichever room is chosen to host it, I suggest a somewhat sophisticated system for determining which other camera feeds are displayed, so if you'll bear with me, not every camera in the facility should be displayed on the feeds. This is for two reasons. Practically, each feed would be tiny, or you'd have more than a regular field of view of screens. Essentially, I suggest that players should be able to understand everything there is to understand from the displays at a glance. This isn't a place players are expected or required to spend a lot of time extracting their benefit. Indeed, they shouldn't be able to control cameras like PC can, just view them at stationary. Secondly, vision over the entire floor would, I humbly propose, be a little too strong. These elements combined, I suggest about 9 active displays per round. Note, active. You see, an easy way to both reduce the room's reliability and increase its replayability, without harming legibility or making it too strong, is to have a larger list of potential active displays from which some amount are randomly selected to actually display each round. Again, for ease of player understanding, I recommend that the actual physical place of each monitor should not change, just whether or not it is on or perhaps present at all. Additionally, under each monitor that displays a unique room should be placed a label denoting the camera's purview to further the speed at which players can grasp the monitor placements. Finally, each screen should be large enough to, without squinting, determine what type of and how many SCPs or people are in the room, but it doesn't need to be so large as to make out, say, the ammunition on the floor. So then, which cameras shall we give a chance of displaying, and how many should they be? Each will add to the total wall space we need, and add to the randomness of the active displays each round. And should we bias the activation selection process in any way? What a puzzle indeed. Well, for entrance zone, where we have only a few important or meaningful rooms, I suggest a somewhat slimmer selection than in heavy, perhaps with 40% meaningful and 60% filler rooms displayed on the cameras, plus the exterior of the intercom above where our camera room is located. This leaves us with 10 feeds plus the intercom, with 6 being active per round. The 4 meaningful cameras would be Checkpoint, the entrance side, Gate A, Gate B, and the office corridor outside Checkpoint that always generates. The filler rooms can be randomized each round, drawing from the remaining areas. The randomization should be set to allow a minimum of 2 and maximum of 3 of the 6 active cameras to show meaningful feeds. Properly randomized, which meaningful feeds are shown. It should always show intercom, and 3 or 2 filler feeds respectively. In this manner, players will be guaranteed to get some useful information, either on Checkpoint, the gates, or Checkpoint and the gates. Will always be open to seeing Doom approaching the room they're in, and also be met with a good mix of other rooms each time. For heavy containment, the calculus becomes somewhat more complex, as there are significantly more meaningful rooms in the zone. Thematically speaking, it would make sense for a heavy containment ops room to show feeds from Nuke Silo Armory, Micro HID servers, Checkpoint, Elevators A and B, Doctor's Containment, Dog's Containment, and Larry's Containment. A feed for PC's containment would be unnecessary, given the room is right outside. And a feed from Shy Guy's room, well... This brings us to 10 meaningful feeds, which, if we were to maintain our meaningful to filler feed ratio from the entrance zone room, would leave us with 25 total feeds, plus 1 for the obligatory feed outside the ops room. Way too many. We can either then cut down on the filler feeds drastically, or cull some meaningful feeds. I suggest a bit of both. Axe the servers and the armory feeds, as they seem the least important. Axe the microfeed, as it is also less important relative, and if it existed, it would require spawning the micro at the beginning of each round instead of spawning it when the door opened, to avoid players thinking it was taken when it wasn't. After that, we're left with a far more respectable 7 meaningful feeds, which allows 4 filler feeds for our reasonable maximum of 12. Of those 12, I suggest 8 be active each round, to roughly mirror the percent active or inactive in entrance zone. Of those 8, either 3 or 4 should be filler, chosen at random each round. Additionally, I suggest 1 filler feed should always be set on a Tesla, if possible, to maximize the potential for witnessing the big funny from afar. So, whatever then would be the point of all this? What, you might be asking, are the tangible gameplay and roleplay benefits of this novel system? A beautifully formulated question, to which my answer is obliged. As momentarily alluded to throughout the explanation, human access to cameras could provide immediate hilarity in the instance of witnessing an SCP approaching the room, or some poor fool getting zapped by a Tesla. Less specifically, any flavor of watching players get zonked from a bird's eye view is bound to be fun. Beyond base schadenfreude and personal shock, however, we encounter more intellectual and game appreciation type benefits. You know the kind of moment, like following the smooth blends of a masterful watercolor, or following the smooth blends of an artisan cheese, or, in our case, observing sublime levels of game element interactivity. Allow me to explain. When observing a given feed, a player might experience a number of interesting events. Is the camera moving? Well, that's PC doing that. Isn't it cool that you can see that in real time? Did the feed just go dark? Well, that's because the room was blacked out. Isn't it cool that you could not see that in real time? Did all your feeds go dark? Well, that's because the generators were cycled. Cassie warned you about that. You shouldn't have been so surprised. Did you just notice that there's a distinct lack of a feed for SCP-096 and realize why? Huh. Neat, right? Did you just black out the room as PC and go completely blind for the duration? Was it annoying? Yeah, probably, but it makes sense. You did just take out camera control for that floor. Neat, right? Besides such, in my opinion, neat moments of appreciation for interplay, the room also provides some highly useful practical benefits. The randomized nature of the feeds severely limits the places campers can successfully hide from both humans and SCPs. Remember, SCPs could theoretically use the feeds too if the doors were opened. As for those more inclined to move, a quick stop off at the camera room could give you a good idea which areas to avoid on your way to checkpoint or surface. Though, crucially, the room is stationary, so your information begins expiring as soon as you leave. This, I suspect, would create an interesting sort of memory/prediction game for approximately a minute or so after one leaves the room, with a potentially rather high skill ceiling and time to mastery, but not so much impact as to be game-breaking. Additionally, particularly perceptive individuals might, for example, notice the corner of the checkpoint on one of the filler feeds that happened to end up in the armory. This little piece of information could save a particularly sweaty tryhard at least half a second when determining their direction later on. Hey, something for everyone. Beyond the individual, a particularly cooperative NDF team could station someone in the room with a radio and receive warnings and call-outs. Yeah, that'll never happen, but it's a nice idea. I can also see the rooms potentially acting as congregation points of sorts, useful to D-boys for evading detection, scientists for finding guards, guards for finding scientists and D-boys, SCPs for finding anyone, and Chaos for finding D-boys and hunting NTF. We can see players running into each other there quite often. Again, this creates a risk-reward scenario where it could be really useful to get some information, but not highly unlikely that someone else will have the same idea, and you have no way of knowing whether they'll be friendly. Well, that just about wraps things up. I hope you've enjoyed entertaining for a moment these systems ideas, and that perhaps they have begun the sparking of some in your own head that you can mess around with for fun. Cheers!